Hi everyone, it's Aya. Before we begin, I want to mention that this episode was recorded in November last year. The conversation is still highly relevant, especially if you're currently running or thinking about starting your own architecture practice. I'm joined by Ray Brown, CEO of Archibiz. In this episode, we dive into the business side of architecture. We discuss real challenges architects face, like winning work, improving profitability, and building more sustainable firms. At the time of recording, Ray mentioned that they were planning to launch something called the Business School for Architects. Since then, the school has launched an app platform called School, that's spelled Skool. It's a free community where architects can learn how to win more work, increase profits, and build more resilient practices. The platform includes a classroom, a discussion space, and an events calendar. If you'd like to check it out, visit skool.com/archibiz. Now let's get into the episode. Welcome to the Architect My Business podcast. I'm Aya Schlachter, your host, founder, and CEO of MGS Global Group. We provide architectural drafting and rendering services for busy firm owners and designers. From starting out solo to now leading a team of over 45 and growing, I've learned a thing or two about making a business thrive. Whether you're thinking of starting, already managing, or want to take your business to the next level, this podcast is for you. Each episode is packed with simple, actionable tips in leadership, people, marketing, processes, and of course, profit. I keep things real. Like you, I've got no time for fluff. This podcast is brought to you by MGS Global Group. Now, let's get into this episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Architect My Business podcast. It's been a while, and I'm back, and I'm glad I'm here with Ray Brown of Archibiz. I know of you, and I'm glad you reached out because we have the same goal of really uplifting the architecture profession. But before we get started and talking about architecture, I read in my questionnaire about your exciting projects and hobbies. You love tennis, and you mentioned Australian rules football, and of course your Archibiz. Talk to me about Australian rules football.
Okay, well, it's something that only seems to be played in Australia. I haven't seen it on TV anywhere else. And I was a very heavy soccer football fan in the UK, support Man United, and but in terms of entertainment value, Australian rules football is amazing because it's a bit like tennis. The scoring system works. You get 6
Oh,
points for a goal and 1 point for something else, and so no team is ever out of the game. There's some amazing
so
comebacks, and a bit like tennis, the scoring system helps the entertainment
so it's
value. It's
different
great.
rules?
Oh,
Is it
completely
different
different
rules?
rules. Yes.
Oh, okay. That's interesting because my son is I think he's an Arsenal. Is it Arsenal fan?
Yes, that is.
He's big on football as well. So I had to mention that. So I know that you're a business coach and entrepreneur, and you've built and sold several businesses in Scotland. So
Yep.
you moved from Scotland to Australia. Do you consider yourself Australian or Scottish?
Oh, I don't think I would say. Yeah, we travel a bit, but you can't take Scotland out of your heart. Really,
That's true.
Australia is probably where we live, and Scotland's where we come from, and we go back to Scotland a lot. So we have the best of both worlds. We've got the Australian get up and go and young country attitude,
Yeah,
whereas Scotland has got the tradition and the history, and we like both. So we're very lucky
that's
to be able
great.
to share both.
Yes.
A bit like you with
So
the
you're
Philippines, I'm sure.
yeah. I've lived in the US for 30 years, but born and raised in the Philippines, and I'm still very Filipino.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of history in terms of business. You've built and sold several businesses, and you've coached startups, major banks, technology companies, and top executives. And architects are just so lucky to have you with your depth of experience and the company that you've built, Archibiz. Let me just look at some of your services here. Um, I mean, you do a lot of things like courses and programs, right? You do have online courses. You actually gave me access to your business foundation program and how to plan projects like a pro. You also have marketing and branding, succession planning, which everyone needs because people just don't think about that. workshops, mentoring and coaching, everything. So Ray, you and I talk about how architects often say we're not taught about business in the university. Why do you think that's the case? And when they realize there's a gap, what do you think they're hesitant to seek out business education?
It's a great question, and I think at the risk of being controversial in this podcast, I don't have a lot of sympathy for architects, to tell you the truth. They do a lot of complaining, and there's a lot of narrative in architecture that we don't make money and nobody understands us and nobody understands our value. But when you think about most professions, they go to university to be taught that profession. They don't go to university to be taught business. Um, if you're a lawyer or an accountant or whatever, you're taught to do that. Plumber, electrician. If you subsequently go into business, then it's up to you to learn the tools that you need for that new adventure, if you like. And I think the excuse that we don't have a business education is just that. It is an excuse. And I think the big problem is that I met a young architect at the beginning of last week, and he said to me, the majority of people on my course doing architecture aspire to have their own practice. Okay, so it's very peculiar to architecture that people there's a real tendency to want to be in your own business, but then it's sort of counterintuitive that there wouldn't be business education for architects. And there's a lot of consultants around helping, but when you listed the things that Archibiz does, it sounds a lot, but business, you need a broad spectrum of understanding a business. Then you can go deeper on the things that you really want to find out about. And we have lots of people that we collaborate with that do these specialist skills, copywriting, websites, even finance. But we do the introductory piece to make sure people aren't ignorant business people.
Yes. So, what do you think are the recurring challenges you see architects are facing in managing their practices, especially when it comes to running a business? What are the biggest challenges?
I think the biggest challenge is not understanding business and not having a framework to even think about the business. So people start up in business, they think it's all about design and winning awards and then putting a website, and people will show up and hopefully there'll be more money in the bank at the end of the month than there was at the beginning. And that's a very simplistic view. What I tell architects is the business model is very simple. Okay, the business model for architecture is, and architects hate me saying this, but all they really do is turn hours into money. Okay, so the business model is very simple, but the product is very complex. So none of us in Archibiz are actually architects, so we can't help with the architecture side. There's plenty of people out there who can do that, but understanding the business side, as I say, it is a simple business model, but there are numerous levers that you can pull to make the business more effective. And we speak about the 4 Ps of business. So the practice itself. So you need a practice that's invoicing more than it's costing. So every month, you're making more money than you're costing the business. So that's the starting point. And the second piece is the projects. So if you don't run your projects efficiently and you don't make the margins that you think you're making, and you don't keep control of that, then that's money left on the table or money going out the door. The third piece is the people. So you need to train and have good people and retain talent, and that takes skills too. That doesn't come naturally to everybody, and people complain that we can't hold on to good people. But then those same people, met someone yesterday who gave me that as a big problem, but he had no vision for his business. He had no culture that he'd worked on in the business. So why would people stay? They don't know where the business is going. They don't know what it means for their career. And they don't really know what the business is all about culturally. And then the 4th P is what we call perception. So it's the perception of the business internally and externally that allows you to attract the right type of clients that you want. Who are you? where do you fit in the market? How do you explain your story to the market and to prospective clients? And how do you demonstrate that in terms of case studies? And websites are the classic example. So the classic architect website is one big picture of a building at the front, no text. And yes, it may look good and it may be very appealing to other architects, but it tells your clients nothing other than, if you want something that looks like that, come to us. And letting the work do the talking is such a big mistake that architects make. You've got to speak to your clients and tell them what makes you different, how you deliver value, what makes you stand out, and why you'll be a good practice to deal with.
Yeah, so one of my favorite websites from an architect is an architect actually in Australia. Her website shows a video of her up front talking about her process, not a building, but her. Because when potential clients are coming to your website, they want to see who they're going to work with, and obviously your projects are there, but personal brand is really important, right, Ray?
Absolutely. Personal brand, use of video. Very few architects use video of themselves. And again, I was meeting an architect yesterday, and he was the classic 11 years in business, struggling a bit, wondering if he wanted to do it for the next 15 years. He was sort of early 40s. We meet a lot of architects like that. But when I went to his website, very attractive website, looked really good, but I couldn't find a picture of him. I was going to meet him in a restaurant. It's a great big restaurant, so I didn't know who I was looking for. So I ended up going to LinkedIn, but that should be on the people. People buy from people when it comes right down to it, and you are the face of the business if you're an architect typically, and people will make a very quick impression. Gee, she looks like a nice person, or she sounds really interesting or genuine, and that's the key, you know.
Yeah. People put photos of their dogs. If you're a dog person or a cat person, put it there. You can gain more clients if you're a dog person. I'm 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. It's well, when we're doing it now, this video, people will watch this video and go, see, this Anya seems like a nice person. He seems to know what he's speaking about. We take a lot of the words are the least important part of the story. It's the tone that we use, the confidence we portray, and the visual thing. We a lot of the messaging is around visual in terms of relationship. And
Yeah.
people
I mean,
make up that opinion very quickly.
yeah. So when I started doing all this podcasting and like video, I was so uncomfortable because I always have these things about my accent or like my run on sentences. But the business grew because they knew who run the
Yeah,
company, right? Like
yeah,
perfection is not necessarily the key, right? It's authenticity. So architects do video, like show your face in your website.
absolutely. The accent, my story with accent. When I came to Australia, of course, everybody says you're from Scotland, and we love Scotland and like your accent. And I tell them that I didn't have an accent till I came to Australia. Yeah.
Well, that's true, right? I didn't have an accent till I moved here, but you're right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Archibiz. You
Yep.
mentioned that you're shifting focus to architects who are just starting or thinking about launching their own practice.
Yep.
Why are you shifting to the younger, newer architects, and what are the skills they need right out of the gate to ensure their success?
Okay. It's a great question. And, hopefully we're going to be that classic 10-year overnight success. So we've been in working with architects for 6 years directly. I've been a business coach for 20 years. So we do know about business, and we have perfected a model and a framework that appears to work with architects so that they have less stress, make more money. But it's been a hard sell online. It's a hard sell, full stop. And what we've realized is that people who've got an established business, they're very time poor. They're quite often cash poor. And change is very difficult for them. When we come along and say you're going to have to do some things different and change your systems and processes, oh my goodness, that sounds really hard. We've made all the mistakes in our business. Our original program was called Designing Architectural Practice Success. Quite a mouthful that nobody could remember. So we've changed the name of that. We've repackaged. We've got a lot more information in the program, but it's now called the Business Foundations Program. And what we've realized is that, like any building, retrospectively fitting foundations is a big ask. And that could well be the reason why established businesses don't flock to our door and say, give us this business education foundational stuff, because it just sounds really hard. Whereas if you think about the people who've recently started, the people who are working for another practice and are even thinking about starting a practice, then it becomes much more logical that we put the right foundations in place. We understand financials, we understand marketing, enough to get by. The phrase that's been used a lot with me by architects is, when it comes to business, I feel like a well-meaning amateur. I don't know what I don't know. And that it's okay to say that, but I don't think it's okay to allow that to persist. Why would you stay ignorant? It's the analogy we use is, you wouldn't jump in a car and drive off without any driving lessons. So why would you start a business without the necessary information and knowledge that you need? Because it can be equally dangerous. Business, as you know, can be really hard. Somebody heard a really good story last week. Somebody said, speaking to a business owner, how do you sleep at night? And he said, I sleep like a baby, awake every 2 hours crying.
Oh my God. That's a good one.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not funny, but it's a good story,
and
right?
it's so
I
true.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
The sleepless nights come as part of business, and business is not tough. They say 4 out of 5 businesses don't make it through the first 5 years. Okay, so if you're starting off as an architectural practice, there's this feeling that the architecture will carry you through, and that architects are always going to be required. So almost there's a feeling that there's almost a right to exist and a right to survive. And I think that's a dangerous mindset, because there's so much competition. AI is coming along. The people who will survive are the people who run really good, well-managed businesses, as well as doing good architecture.
That's interesting that you said that you're shifting towards, newer businesses and younger practices and people who are thinking. I started my business when, like years ago, kind of like 5 years out of college. I did really well. It was a curse that I did really well in the beginning. I was making a lot of money in my first 5 years, and I thought everything was going to be amazing. But, with economy and unexpected things happened. And then I hired a business development consultant just to get my business floating again. But then we worked backwards, right? So we tailored our consulting from business development. Once I was able to pay him, then we started the foundational, we started building the foundation. So my question for you is, how do you tailor your coaching approach to architects that have different, at different points?
Yeah, I should perhaps add something to my last answer so that my colleagues in Archibiz don't think we're leaving our existing clients behind. We've got 40 or 50 clients that we work with every single month around the world on a monthly basis. So in some we've had for clients for 4 and 5 years. So I don't want people to think that we're not doing consultancy or coaching. We will continue that. The approach to the new and aspiring practice owners is very much the online offering that we're going to have. So just to answer your question about architects, it really comes back to those 4 Ps again, and looking at the practice, the projects, the people, and the perception in a way that's appropriate for architects. The business principles are still the same. Okay, a budget is still a budget. A profit and loss is still a profit and loss. But if you don't understand them as tools for business, then you're really running your business with one hand tied behind your back. And what we provide for architects is frameworks. Every business is different, but if you don't have the framework to analyze the data, then it's a bit like trying to plan a journey with no concept of a map. Okay, if you don't understand what a map or how to read a map or what a map looks like, then it's very difficult to plan that journey. So in essence, what we do is we provide in all of the different areas of business the templates and the base knowledge that says to sort out this part of your business and to plan the future in this part of your business, here's where you start, and here's the first steps. And it just
Is
makes
that
such a difference to people.
can that be found in your business foundations program? The whole, I mean, which program in the your programs and courses will tackle that one? So we can talk about that.
Yep. So we've got the Business Foundations program, which is an 8-module program. It really covers all of we say there are 24 elements of business. Things like the financials, things like positioning, words that people use all the time, but really sometimes don't know what does it actually mean, and how do I hire my first employee, and how do I write a job description, and what should my website look like, and what's best practice in whatever. So the program covers all of that. And then what we did in addition, we have some very good connections within the market, the support market for architects. So we went to those people and we said, would you like to contribute to our program? And they said, absolutely. So we've got people like Nikita Morel speaking about copywriting. We've got Amy Edwards speaking about website design. Someone speaking about finance. Ian Motley from Blue Turtle is probably the world expert in fee proposal writing. So he's done an hour. And if people want more information, then they can go and speak to Ian or Amy or Nikita. We want to be the conduit to get people to the help and support they need. We can't answer everybody's questions, and we can't be experts in everything. Our
Right.
expertise is in what we call practical and holistic foundational business education. So Nikita said to me once, she said, I know people have done your program because they ask me much better quality questions when they come to me. Okay, because
Oh,
they've got
wow,
a
that's
basic
amazing. I
understanding.
love Nikita, by the way. I'm a big Nikita fan.
I know you. I think you told me last time we spoke that you were a videographer at the AIA conference.
Yeah, we were together, took her photos. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, she was very pregnant then. I mean, 6 months, I think, pregnant. So
Yeah, yes.
now she
She's
has
very
a
prolific. She's really, I'm
yes,
amazed at the
yeah,
amount of stuff that she churns out. It's great. And it's all good
yes,
stuff on LinkedIn.
yes. I every time I look at her LinkedIn post, I always have a takeaway. So it's thanks, Nikita. Um, so I according to your website and some of the research that I've done, and key features of Archibiz is you have a unique methodology of simplifying complex business processes. That sounds very appealing, and viewing effective business systems as a competitive advantage rather than merely fixing problems.
Yeah. So
Can you?
maybe if I speak
Yeah,
about the methodology a little bit, um,
yeah.
everyone knows the phrase, I need to work on my business as well as in my business. But nobody really tells you how to work on your business. And that's what we do. So we really do when we work with businesses, we do two things. We do coaching and mentoring. So coaching helps people figure out where they want to go and what they want to achieve. Mentoring sort of helps you get there by somebody who's been there before and done the same things. The second part of the offering is what we call a board meeting. And a board meeting can be quite scary. People go, oh, that sounds like people in suits and oak paneled rooms and all of that. But for us, it's just a time once in the month, where you look at the business in a structured way: finance, operations, sales and marketing, and special projects that you're doing to improve the business. And if you run that every month, same time, same place, that really makes a huge difference. And it's why big businesses have a board. Sometimes you have external people, but even if it's a solo person in their business, we try and get them to think that they are not the business. We've got to separate the individual from the business, and we've got to look at the business as a separate entity that actually delivers for the owner what they want in terms of revenue and lifestyle and all of those things, not just continuous stress. So the board meeting, we call it the secret sauce, because we meet typically if we're coaching people. You can do it on your own, but if we are coaching people, we attend the board meeting every month. We are external people, so we can be objective. And what we say is if we take 5 decisions every month, however small, that are aimed at improving the business, that's 60 in a year, your business will transform in the course of a year. Things will tighten up, you'll become more professional and typically more successful.
I love that. So if I'm your client, I'm a coaching client, is it more like a mastermind or it's me and Archibiz as my board?
That's most often. Sometimes we've got 2 or 3 partners in architectural practices, so they would all attend with us. And again, that it's amazing how often at those meetings that stuff comes out. I didn't know that. I didn't know you were doing that. And we try and separate people so that they trust one another to go and do things in the best interest of the business. It doesn't. There comes a point in most architectural practices where you've got more than one partner where you need to get some surprises. People need to. You can't know everything about everything that's happening. So allow your colleagues to go and do what they need to do in their area to make the business better. And that's why the frameworks and the reporting become so important, so that you may get some pleasant surprises that things have happened to improve the business, but you don't get any shocks. Okay.
It's really like consistency, right? Like every month of
exactly.
accountability, right?
Yeah, we have a coach too, and the word he uses is rhythm. Says you need the regular rhythm, and it builds up momentum. You then, and also one of the big pieces in this is accountability. Okay, so quite often we say that architectural practices are driven by 2 forces: the work deadlines and the clients. Okay, and what we do is we bring the perspective of the business to that thought process. What's the interest of the business? How do we make sure that as we're looking after the client and the projects, that the interests of the business are also taken care of? And that's the role of the board. The board is, in any business, however big or small, it's there to look after the business on behalf of all the stakeholders. And we educate clients around that, and that people feed back to us that that's the one thing that now we work on the business and we know what's happening. We do some forecasts. We've got budgets. We just feel much more comfortable and more in control of the business than we did before.
That's really powerful to have a board and to have consistency and rhythm, like billing. In my company, we bill every day because we have a lot of projects. So I have a dedicated person just billing 2 hours a day. Because because if not, how am I going to pay my staff, right? You need to have a rhythm. So I'm curious about what you said about the business owner is a separate entity from the business.
Yep.
And that's very difficult for architects to internalize because their value is tied to their business. How do you separate the entity, and do you have any case studies and success stories?
Yeah, quite interesting. Architects typically fall into 2 categories at the beginning. There's the people who call their business Optima Architecture, and the people who call themselves Joe Smith Architects. Okay, so right from day one, they are associated with the business, with the name above the door, and that's good and bad. It's a personal service, but it's quite difficult to scale, and it's quite difficult to exit if you've got your name above the door. It's one of the hurdles, and I think, just generally separating, thinking of the business, even if you're Joe Smith Architects or Mary Brown Architects, the business is a separate entity. The business should pay you a salary every month. The amount of architects we meet and we say, how much profit do you make? And they say, $100,000. Okay, that's very good. What's your salary? I don't get a salary. The profit is my return from the business. That is such a short-sighted and non-business approach. Really, every month you should get money into your bank account That's your salary, same as if you were working for someone else. You are an employee of your own business. And in addition to that, the business should make 15 to 20% profit. That gives you a return for your risk and your investment and employing people and all the sleepless nights. Okay. Otherwise, you might as well work for someone else.
Yeah. I have a lot of questions about that. Like, because I was in that situation where whatever was left over, I paid myself. But my question for you is like, do you also help architects in terms of their pipeline planning? Because sometimes with the economy, with COVID, with, things that are, like elections or whatever, like you can't really um, predict your pipeline. What is your advice for people who have no pipeline planning skills? Like,
Well,
how do they?
this
That's the number
this
one question. And the second is finance. So how can you pay yourself if you don't have a pipeline? So I that's every architect's problem. First is
it is.
pipeline. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's speak about pipelines. So I had this conversation yesterday with a group of actually landscape architects, and architects are actually very lucky because they've got what we call work secured. So they have work already signed up that they're going to work on for the next year, 18 months. Okay, so that's a base number. And if they don't have that, they need to go and find more work and sign it up. So that's line one. Line one is work already secured. Okay. Then they've got costs and they've got people and all of that. So they need to make a certain amount to at least break even every month. And that number, the difference between what they've got secured and the money they need to cover the costs is the gap that they need to go and fill. So it's not the architects typically speak about the cliff and the wall, when we're going to run out of work, because they only consider line one, which is work already secured. So I said to the chap I met yesterday, CEO of quite a significant business, I said, how much work in progress do you have? And work in progress for us is all of the uninvoiced portions of the work that you've got signed up. Okay, so you may have done half the job or you haven't started it. Or you add that up and you say, we've got $1 million of work in progress. He didn't know that number. Now, to me, that would be my number one number in an architectural practice. How much work have I got signed up and how many months of coverage does that give me against my overhead? Right. And in terms of how do we predict the future, I often tell the story of if you were CEO of a retail business, right, a big retail business, and you went to the board, let's say mid-September, and the board said to you, so what's the last quarter looking like? And you turn around as the CEO and say, I have no idea. I don't know who's going to come in my shop and with what the weather's going to be like. And so I really have no idea. You would just be put up against the wall and shot, okay? Because that's not an acceptable answer. And then the question is, so how do I know what the last quarter is going to look like? Well, it's going to look like, I think we came up with 4 or 5 things yesterday. How much capacity have you got to use? So you need to get work to fill the capacity. What does the market look like at the moment? Okay, is it a soft market, booming? So you know that. How many live proposals have you got out there? And what's your hit rate? Okay, so if you win 1 in 3, you need to put 3 times the proposal value out there to get the amount of business that you need. And there's a few different factors that feed into that make it's not an educated guess. Well, it is an educated guess. It's not just a pure guess of what the future is going to look like. You've got a lot of factors, and one of the key KPIs that we use and advise our architects to use is what we call a rolling average of work secured. Okay, so everybody says architecture is lumpy. We win some and then we don't win anything for a couple of months. And so we say, okay, add up the last 6 months, divide that by 6 and record that number. That's your rolling average of work secured. And if you keep a note of that every month, that's your best indicator of how much business you're going to do and invoice in 6 months' time.
That's great. I completely agree. Before I got my business consultant, I had no idea I just knew how much I made the year before and this year. But now I'm like, I know what every quarter looks like. Quarter 1 this year versus quarter 1 last year. I know that number, even comparing quarter 2 this year to last year, and also knowing the dips in the economy. Like I know my Q2's numbers are normally lower than Q1 because the Q4 from the last year, I still have projects that come in. So knowing your numbers will really help you plan for also a rainy day, savings, higher profitability, and just capacity planning. So my
Absolutely.
question for you is, yeah, what is the average in terms of global industry average in terms of profitability? Is it 30% of like their gross or
Well, I think yes, it's quite a big question because what is profit? And people, architects have historically developed a very complex way of looking at the finance side of the business. And one of the biggest hurdles that we come up against is people are absolutely wedded to the concept of charge out rates. Okay, and meeting I had yesterday, it was a $5,000 project, and we were looking at hours at Charger, and they said we were losing money on this project. Well, they weren't actually losing money when you looked at the raw cost of doing that job. But they never look at that. They look at charge out rates and utilization in that space. But that assumes that every job is different, okay, which is just not true. And it takes away one of the biggest levers that you've got as an architectural practice, which is pricing. Okay, so what is your pricing strategy and how does that differ in different markets? Markets that you're trying to break into may have a different pricing structure to a regular client that you've been working with for 5 years. So it's really important that on that financial side, people really understand this. To answer your question, profit for us is right at the bottom. Okay, so it's after you paid everything and you have a number left at the bottom. And we say a realistic target is between 15 and 30%.
15
15
and
and 30.
30%?
If you're making
Okay.
30% in the typical architectural practice that we deal with, you must be dealing with really high net worth people who are prepared to pay a lot of money. Because if you get to 30% in the typical architectural practice, then we say to them, yeah, you must be having a lot of late nights and the rivets must be popping in your boat because that's hard to do on a consistent basis.
Right,
15 to
right.
20, yeah.
Is
And maybe
average.
people would disagree with me, but in the clients that we deal with, most of the clients that we meet initially don't make 15 to 20%. They're lucky if they make
Right.
any profit at all. They pay the salaries, and sometimes those salaries for the principals are not even market rate salaries, and that's
Yeah.
such a tragedy that people work so hard and put so much effort into building a business, and they're actually being paid less than they would be working for someone down the road. Okay, that
That's
that
why
that
architects go to Archibiz. Really, I loved everything that, I learned from my mistakes, and that's what got me here because my business was up and down, but now I know how to manage most of the things except like crazy events like COVID. I couldn't manage that.
yeah. Sorry, just to interrupt a second. I was speaking to this group yesterday, and I told them two stories that happened in the last week. The lady who um, does our dog cutting. We've got a cavoodle, and she cuts the very nice lady. She sent me a photographs on WhatsApp. She was in hospital for 3 days because a dog had bitten her hand, and she's not going to be able to work for the next probably 3 to 6 months. Okay,
Oh
that's the
no.
first one. Second one was I got an email from um, we've been to Bali on holiday, and we've been back to the same resort a couple of times. And I know the staff, so I get emails from them sometimes. And the hotel has been closed down. Okay, for whatever reason, probably just not. It's in a very remote area of Bali, and they obviously couldn't make it work. And 100 staff have been made redundant. Business is not easy. Okay, so the idea that you go into architecture and you're going to be flying in first class and making lots of money, it just business typically for most people, and we all hear the success stories of people making lots of money online and selling the business for millions. The typical story of business is hard work, tears, some good times, but lots of difficult times too.
Yeah. Wow, that's true. in your experience, how do the business challenges differ from your clientele, like in the US, UK, Australia? I mean, is there some commonality and differences among these regions?
They're all the same. That's what we've found. So
Really?
absolutely. So we've got clients in Scotland, we've got clients in Sydney, Australia. We've got one client who's a very successful architecture practice in a place called Yellowknife in northern Canada. Okay, and they are in snow from like now through until the end of April. So and the ground is completely frozen. So some of their architectural challenges is around how do they get stuff in the ground and how do they design things that will cope with that level of permafrost. But when it comes to the business, they use exactly the same model as we use for everyone else. Same board structure, the same board agenda, the same. We've tried to simplify things. That's the key. That there's a real tendency to say, the more information I've got, the more knowledge I've got, the more successful I'll be. And typically that's just confusing. Okay, you need the insight and the tight reporting that says there's a problem, there's a thing. It's got to be insightful. That's the key word. Actionable insight is what we're looking from the data, not knowledge or information or and yeah, I saw a fee proposal yesterday that would just blown my mind if I got a fee proposal like that. It was all numbers. It was all step 1, step through to step 10. Not one graphic, nothing. I would be completely put off.
Yeah. But I really like what you said, and your business model and your secret sauce of having a board, and I think that's really really instrumental. That's why big companies are successful, because they have board members they're accountable for, and for a small firm to have access to Archibiz and the network of professionals in your practice, I mean, that's really a priceless. I think every young architect, emerging firm owner, even seasoned firm owner should talk to you, especially when they're struggling with pipeline finance, capacity planning. It's never too late to start with a
No,
coach. So
no,
you don't want to sleep like a baby, right? You want to you want to sleep like 8 hours a night. I love
absolutely,
that.
absolutely. No, you're so right, and that's been our frustration as a business for the last few years, and why we're going to try this. Not try. We are going to shift to new and aspiring owners, because the people who are running a business, as I said very early in the podcast, are time poor. And one of the other issues is I really don't think they believe there's a solution. They speak to their friends and everybody's struggling and we don't make money and da. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So to look outside and say, here's somebody from Archibiz, here's Ray Brown saying there's a better way to do things. He's not even an architect. What the hell does he know? And that it's so easy to put that to the side and say, well, no, I'll just carry on working really hard. That's really the only answer. And
You know the
so,
Yeah, the biggest companies like Michael Kors. Michael Kors is a designer, but the reason why he became super successful was John Idol, who was the CFO. Like, you need, the yin to the yang, right? You need the
yeah,
creative and the business person. There's a lot of big companies who have creative geniuses, but they need the business partner, right? Like
yeah,
BR Ingles, like big architecture had the woman, what's her name? The CFO, or she's now the CEO. I mean, they became super profitable because they hired a CEO who's not even an architect, right?
correct,
So that's
right.
that's you don't want to hire an architect who's a business coach, to be honest. I mean,
No,
you know,
well, you can't. A lot of the people in the marketplace, the Mark Harlepages and the Ryan Willard and Enoch Sears, all of these people, they're all architects, and we have a
yeah,
really good working relationship with all of them.
yeah,
But it's just different. If you've run your own
yeah,
practice, I just feel probably no, they've got a lot to offer, these folks. And
yeah,
if if my son was going to be an architect and start his own business, I would say to him, go and get help. I don't care if it's business of
yeah,
architecture or entre architect
yeah,
or whoever. Just go and get help, because trying to do it on your own and listening to other people who've done it are not going to.
Yeah.
It's not going to give you the tools that you really need, and it's going to be a
Actually,
struggle.
you're right. I take it back. Architects who already have learned their lessons, have deep knowledge, and have succeeded through the mistakes, then they can, they can coach. I think they have enough experience to help other architects really succeed. You're right. Like, but not like architects fresh out of grad school. I mean, you see, not just architects, you see a lot of business coaches out there who've never run their businesses. Like I was,
This is
right?
it.
I've seen so
Yeah,
many like, wait, you're a business coach. Let's look at your credentials and there's no business behind it. But yeah, like architects could be really good sources of like um knowledge, especially the successful architects who can mentor the younger aspiring architects. Now that we're wrapping up, I just have, I don't know if you know, I started a new podcast called AI for Architects.
okay. I was aware of
It's
that.
really,
Yes.
yeah. So I didn't want to start a podcast. I was, I had anxiety. I say in my post, in my LinkedIn post, I was AI curious first. When I started using AI, I became AI anxious because I know of the capabilities that all these tools can, can do to the value of our profession. So I started the podcast because my team and I have done over 6 months of research use cases, and we've looked at 55 different AI tools. It's for me to educate myself, and I'm going to educate everyone based on my research. I'm not paid by any of these manufacturers or these software companies, but it's just me doing my job to educate people in terms of what's to come. So my question for you is, where do you see the future of architecture with the rise of AI and other technologies, and the way architects will evolve, how their businesses will evolve with AI. So let me just, what are your thoughts on AI and architecture and how to move forward?
It's an absolutely great question, and I have no idea how to answer that, to tell you the truth, other than to say there are always changes in business. Okay, and the key is that not to ignore those changes and to educate yourself. Speaking to people like you, you've done all the research. Why would I do the research again when you've done that? And there are so many examples in the marketplace of businesses that have failed to change and failed to see the changes coming early enough to adapt. So you look at BlackBerry, Nokia, Blockbuster videos. These are all really successful businesses that don't exist anymore. Okay, Nokia, and I'm sure does, and BlackBerry does, but at the scale, they were market leaders. But
BlackBerry
along
was the
came,
phone, right? Like the phone. Yeah, I had one of those.
yeah, yeah,
Where
I had a
you were
Nokia
email.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I think
like
Nokia's
the
still
Oyster.
around. I think Nokia's still around, but BlackBerry, like there was a documentary in Netflix about
Yeah,
it. Actually,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's yeah. I just think architects don't have a right to exist. Okay, and they do complain about other people, project managers taking a lot of their work and designers taking their work and da 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 da. They've allowed that to happen. Okay, and the naivety around business and so my best story of architect. I was on a panel 5 years ago, and had a client of mine there, and we were speaking about business, and the topic of the conference was the business of architecture. There were 300 architectural practices there, and at one point on the panel, an architect that looked a bit like me, older and grey-haired, he took the microphone at one point and he said, "What you people have got to remember is we're not a business, we're not an industry, we're a profession." Now, that just blew my mind because I have no idea what that means. And it's such a bad piece of advice to give to business people, because whether you like it or not, you're in business. Doesn't matter whether you're a plumber or a joiner or a lawyer or an architect. If you run your own business, like it or not, you are in business, and it's incumbent on you to learn the tools of the trade.
Thanks so much, Ray.
That's my rant
No,
for the
no,
day.
no. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. Is there anything, any last final messages or anything that is coming up in Archibiz? And where can we find you?
Okay.
Where can we find you? Yeah.
So I'm going to make an announcement now that I don't know when this podcast is going to go out, and my team will be saying you shouldn't have spoken about that at the moment, but I will. We're going to be starting a school community on the platform School, SKOOL, and I think this is going to be. I think that platform is going to be huge. It already is very successful. Alex Hormozi has invested $100 million in the business just back in February. So we've come across that platform. We think it's where we'll be housing our courses, but more importantly, our community, where people can chat and get advice. And we'll be looking to build that community over the next few years. And the focus will be on new and aspiring practice owners to get the really good basic business education that they need. And we won't be speaking about architecture and design and nothing like that, because we can't help with that, but we will be able to help with business. So come and join the community, and let's have some fun.
Thank you so much, Ray. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Architect My Business podcast. If you want more, head over to architectmybusiness.com for more episodes, show notes, and links to everything mentioned in this episode. Don't forget to catch our mini shows, Her Space, Ask Aya, and our main show, Architect My Business. If you enjoyed our episodes and want to hear more, please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Your feedback really helps us grow. Stay tuned for the next episode. Bye!